A question for you. It's not rhetorical. Do you believe that the gospel contains good news? Well, then show it to your face. That was the invitation of a speaker some years ago at a conference that I was at. And it really was a challenge. There were a lot of religious and educators there. But yet it was the same invitation to oftentimes when you see people gathering, we've heard this all before. What can we learn possibly? It was an interesting challenge. Do you honestly believe that the gospel contains good news? And most of us, of course, like yourselves, said, yeah, sure, okay. Next question. Well, then show it to your face. How do you reflect it? How do you, in some way, embody it? It isn't an invitation to become a street preacher. It isn't necessary to just stand around and shout out that Jesus is good. But it really is ways in which our lives are affected, that we somehow contain that good news, that we can proclaim it in our subtle and quiet ways. It is the invitation to proclaim the gift of that presence of God among us. It is with that understanding that we can come and gather here on a beautiful Sunday morning. We can, in the shadow of the next few Sundays as well, recognizing that we will hear more about Jesus leaving in the Feast of the Ascension next week. And then in the week following, we will be recipients of the good news. We will truly be blessed by the Paraclete as we celebrate the 2000th birthday of the beginning of the Church. We look for ways in which we can understand the gift of Pentecost, the very thing that Jesus talks about in the gospel reading today, that we will be the recipients of the Holy Spirit, who will remind us and encourage us and give us strength in the moments of transition to find ways in which we can carry the gift of what has been given into the very world in which we live. We are a church in transition. Clearly, just a few weeks ago, we elected a new pope. We had confidence in the experience of the Holy Spirit entering into the conclave, despite maybe what some of our cynicism might have been. If you saw the movie, The Conclave, you recognize there's a little bit of politicking going on in those events. But graciously, we come to believe that the Holy Spirit will triumph. And truly, I think quite clearly, in Pope Leo, we have come to the realization that here is a person who is truly the pontifex, the one who is the bridge builder. Ponts in Latin, of course, is bridge. We look for ways in which we can trust in the gift of the Holy Spirit to give us the experience of leadership that will move us through these times of transition. It isn't like we are into something new here. If we heard that first reading from the Acts of the Apostles, we hear that the church was in total flux, trying to figure out, as Paul was arguing with Peter about, no, we can't bring the Greeks into the church. They're not going to accept these kind of dietary laws or this circumcision for the males. No, they're not going to do it. We've got to figure out a better way in which we can invite people in to the experience of an unfolding recognition of the Holy Spirit, guiding the church even in the midst of changes, even in the midst of these difficult moments. We struggled with it, so many of us in Vatican II, so many years ago. I'm a product of that, as a baby priest, being ordained in 1970. It was really at the moment of change when the Latin Mass was moving away and we were introduced into the altar being turned around and somehow engaging in the experience of what we now have come to believe is a better way of doing it. Even though there are struggles within the church itself and those who want to maintain that old tradition of the Latin Mass, but it isn't to say it's wrong, it's just to say that what is it that is more inviting? What is it that brings us into the experience of what can be understood as a bridge between the old and the new? Maybe it is Pope Leo's job, and maybe the gift of God's grace that will give you and myself the power to be able to pray that we might come with a sense of continuity, a sense even in the midst of our difference, searching for one big, beautiful, you thought it was going to say tax bill, didn't you? No. One big, beautiful gospel that we can come to believe in and to find strength and hope for the future ahead. I think of that little boy a few weeks ago who came up to me and said, "We have a new pope, do you know that?" And I said, "Well, I heard about it." He said, "His name is Leo, and my name is Leo." I said, "Oh, that's wonderful." Then he has a lot of funny things behind the name. I don't know what those are. I said, "Those are Roman numerals." He looked at me and said, "What?" Well, some of us actually know what Roman numerals are. Many of us grew up with those, and to find a way in which we can proudly recall that we could figure out what that X and those V, the 1 and the V for Pope Leo XIV. I think my challenge might be to you to go home and figure out in Roman numerals what your age is. I can do it. I can start with L at 50 and move up, or I could start with C, meaning 100, and move down. Maybe it is we don't need to make it any more mysterious than that. And after 55 years of priesthood, I'm still learning that we are in flux, that we still must be able to give a little and take a little. We must be able to recognize the gift of God's mercy, the gift of God's invitation to change, to find a better way, one might say, to challenge each other with the question, do you think that the gospel actually is good news? And how do we experience it? How do we teach it? How do we live our lives in these moments of difficulty and transition? I know my experience here in the beautiful Basilica of St. Mary over these many, many years, a gift of gratitude, certainly an attitude of gratitude that develops even in watching the changes of the congregation in the midst of these radical changes within our own lives, in funerals and the loss of individuals that truly have helped us to make sense out of our world. But yet we find through the strength of friendship, the gift of those who will surround us in times of transition and bring us into, one might say, a safe harbor. I think oftentimes of the experience of many changes in my own life, but it is only through the grace of God that we can find strength in surrounding each other with hope. I was planting flowers yesterday. It was a wonderful opportunity back at St. Albert the Great Parish, where I'm pastor as well. And I was reminded that 5 years ago it was the murder of George Floyd. In the neighborhood in which I live in Longfellow, the place was on fire. Walgreens, just a half a block down from the parish, was on fire. The police station, the post office, Cub, Target, it was a very frightening period. But yet it was during that time too that I was planting flowers. It was something that gave me strength and hope to try to create some edge of beauty. And this man came by when I was planting, not yesterday, but 4 or 5 years ago. And he said, "What are you doing? The place is on fire and you're planting flowers." And I said, "Yeah, I need to try to create some sense of beauty here." He said, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah, I think actually what I'm doing is planting hope." And he looked at me and he said, "I'm going to go home and plant some hope too." Maybe it is in that experience that we can learn from each other in moments of fear and transition that we can truly be a hopeful people. I think of the expression my father often used when we would be going to funerals. That's what Irish families did when we were kids. We went to wakes and to funerals. That was part of our social life. But he would always say, Joe, he said, this invitation to try to understand these transitions, that friendship really divides our grief and it doubles our joy. We need to be able to be present to one another in these moments of transition. We need to be able to help divide the grief and the uncertainty, looking for ways in which we can see beyond the fear through the eyes of faith, that there is a tomorrow that truly is reflective of hope. May that one big, beautiful experience of God's promise and presence here today, as we prepare for Pentecost, as we prepare next week too for the Ascension. Jesus is quite clear about it. He said, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. I'm going to prepare a place for you, and I will come back and be with you." It is with that understanding and that understanding of God's presence that we can be assured of the promise of tomorrow. May our hearts be blessed as we work for ways in which we can assist in making that experience truly a reflection of the good news of Jesus Christ.